What's up guys, welcome back to Destiny Updates. We've gotten a ton of information out of the E3 interviews over the last few days. Most of those I highlighted in a previous video, but I wanted to go over them all here with my own commentary. So let's get started. First up, the size of the world. We don't know specific numbers, but we do know that a lot of areas that we see are explorable. For instance, in the opening cutscene, we see this sort of beautiful vista of these like mountains and this river. According to Joseph Staten, all of that area is part of the explorable world that we can visit, which is pretty damn awesome. And then once they crossed that wall in the gameplay and went into the Cosmodrome as it's called, that big ship warped in the distance, causing a bunch of structures to collapse. And we've been told that that area out there where the structures collapsed is also part of the explorable world that we can go and visit. So that's all pretty cool. On to the next thing, let's talk about the multiplayer. So in Destiny we have fire teams, which are basically just squads for you and your friends, or even just strangers. If you want to group together and go to a specific mission or task, then you can create a fire team. And the entire world is co-op, so even in the purely story-based campaign, you can still take a fire team into those missions and play with your friends, or even strangers that you met up with somewhere if you decided to form a fire team. Now aside from exploring the world with your fire team, the other thing we've seen so far is public events. And basically how these public events work is you'll be going along by yourself or with a fire team in, say, a story area, or possibly other game modes as well, like raids or competitive, which we don't really know anything about just yet. But basically you'll just be going along doing whatever you're doing, and the world will suddenly cause some sort of major event. In this particular demo, we saw that big ship warping in, and that's what caused the public event. But that's not the only type of event that can happen. I think something about some sort of monster coming up out of the ground has also been mentioned in some interviews, but specifics about that aren't known yet. I don't even think it's confirmed, to be honest. But I'm sure there will be a bunch of different things in-game that can cause these public events to form. Basically, it just has to be something kind of major that affects everyone in the area. But again, once that event happens, in this case the ship warping in, players are then channeled together seamlessly using their behind-the-scenes matchmaking system, and you never have to click a single button or do anything at all. You simply walk out into this area and you're there. Now these public events can't happen anywhere, they can only happen in these public areas, which are quite common by the sound of it, but it's not the entire map. For instance, when the fire team was going through that big wall killing the Fallen, that was not a public area and you will not encounter strangers there. If you want to go there with other players and play cooperatively, you do have to form a fire team, either with friends or strangers you meet in the tower or wherever out in the world. But you won't just encounter random people in a place like that, it only happens in public areas. Now how often we'll see public areas we don't actually know. However, they did say that there is a number of public areas in old Russia, which is where this demo took place. How many exactly we don't know, but I'm assuming it's a fair amount. Now there is no opt-in or anything like that for public events. You simply walk in, and if one happens, then you automatically become part of it. Because they want to make this immersive world where it doesn't feel like you have to go through a menu. You're just walking through the world and it's happening around you in real time. Now they did say that if you don't want to be part of a public event, if you just simply want to do your own thing with your fire team or by yourself, you want to continue your story mission or whatever you're doing, you can simply walk along. You don't have to get involved, you can simply walk past or avoid the area completely. Again, there is no sort of opt-in or yes or no, so you can't just say no, I don't want to be in this and it just disappears. But you can physically avoid it by just walking right through or taking a different route, whatever you want to do. Now they did say that of course they want that option there for people to just move on if they don't want to get involved in the event, but they also said it's unlikely that you'd want to do that just because of how cool it is to fight with these fire teams in this public thing, but also because of the awesome loot you'll get out of it. Now again, besides doing story missions or exploring the environment by yourself or with your fire team and the public events, there are more game modes or activities you can do in Destiny, both things like competitive multiplayer and other cooperative activities as well, but we don't know specifics about those yet. Now the final thing about multiplayer that I want to touch on before moving on is how many players the game will support per area. Now unfortunately we still don't know. In the public event that we've seen, we saw 7 players total, so that seems like it might be a reasonable ballpark number to go by, at least for these sort of public event player versus AI situations. It's very important to note that in a situation like this where it's player versus AI, it's much more intensive on your internet connection and on the servers powering it. So even if we can only get 7 players in this sort of player versus AI situation, that doesn't mean that we can't get more than that in competitive multiplayer. A great example is Halo. You can only have 4 cooperative players in campaign, and even then it gets laggy sometimes. Yet in competitive multiplayer you can still have 16 just fine. So even if we can only get 7 players in these cooperative events, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the number in competitive multiplayer is significantly higher. Also, another thing worth mentioning is in an interview with Joseph Staten, he said they still don't have the exact number of players nailed out, and they're still working on what works best. And he also made it sound like the exact player count may vary for specific events. Now moving on from multiplayer, let's talk about vehicles really quick. In the gameplay demo, we saw this new little speeder bike type vehicle, which we later found out is called the Sparrow, although Staten did say that name isn't final and may not stick. Now what they did say about the Sparrow is that it's issued to every Guardian as basically a quick and easy fast transport around the world. And it sounds like you can basically summon it anytime you want. We don't know specifics, but they did say that your personal spaceship acts sort of like a storage unit for you and actually stores your Sparrow. So I wouldn't be surprised if you can basically call it in and your ship quickly flies over and drops it for you. Sort of like the way they dropped in the Guardians, they basically like flew overhead and kind of teleported them down. Something like that seems likely in my opinion. Now we also got to see the fallen spider tank in-game. This specific one was called a Devil Walker. I imagine that's like a class of them or something, I'm not really sure. But we also get to see the way it's dropped from its dropship. It sort of hangs upside down and then does this backflip and drops to the ground. It looks pretty awesome in my opinion. Now back to our personal spacecraft real quick. They were asked if we could pilot them, and although they didn't give any concrete answer, basically said they're not ready to talk about that yet, he did sound rather positive and maybe like he was hinting that it will be possible. We'll just have to wait and see. Personally, I really hope it is. Now onto weapon and player customization and progression. We got to see this sort of skill tree system that affects both your player, your armor, and your weapons, but I want to make a dedicated video just for that because there's a lot to digest, so expect to see a video coming soon breaking this whole thing down. On to the next thing, Destiny for PC. They were asked this numerous times, and every time they did sound positive, basically saying that they want to get this in the hands of as many people as possible, and they want everyone to be able to play it, and that they themselves have many people in the studio who play on PC, and they'd like to be on PC. But they are developing for 4 consoles after coming from just one Xbox back with Halo, so they have a lot on their plate and they're not ready to talk about PC just yet. But it did sound positive, and personally, I think it will come to PC, but in my opinion, I think it would have to come later. Moving on to loot in Destiny, we've got some important information to go over. The first and biggest thing in my opinion is that loot in Destiny is all in private loot streams, as they're calling it. Basically, all the loot that is dropped is privately dropped just for you. So if you're in a group of 7 people, everyone gets their own stream of loot specifically for them, and you can't take anyone else's loot or interfere with them in any way. Each loot drop is specifically for one person and it's private just for them. So you don't have to worry about your loot getting stolen or anything like that. It's private just for you. And it also sounds like the loot will be tailored to you and your character, both the type of character you have and the level of your character, so you'll always get loot that you like even if you're going back to old areas you've already been to. Which I think is really cool. It helps increase the replayability of going back to places you've already been. And also, say you're like a level 20 or something, like quite a high level, and you have a friend that's really low level and is still doing the early missions but you want to go play with him, you'll still get good high-end loot that you'll enjoy. Next up, let's talk about the differences between the narrative campaign or story world and the multiplayer world. Basically, there is no difference. It's all one world. They're completely the same. As we saw in this demo, the fire team was doing their story mission going through the wall there, and when they came out, they were put into this public event, this big multiplayer thing, just completely automatically. So there is no separate worlds in Destiny. Even competitive multiplayer, although we know very little about it, will be the same connected world as the story part. You'll still have your same character there, you'll have your same loot. Any awesome stuff that you've earned and upgraded in the story segment, you can take right over into competitive. It's all one seamless thing. Moving on, another thing that I wanted to touch on really briefly is theater mode in Destiny. We don't know if the feature will exist or not, but Pete Parsons was asked in an interview, and he said, "We're not talking about that feature yet." So definitely not confirmation in any way whatsoever, but I really hope it's there. I think it definitely helps sort of increase the longevity of the game and the cool stuff you can do with it. And personally, it helps me directly just because of this YouTube channel. It makes it a lot easier for me to make awesome videos for you guys once the game has been released. So I really hope it's there. At least it does sound positive so far. Now, if we think about it, Bungie is the company that created theater back in Halo 3, so it wouldn't really be a surprise if they brought it back. After all, it was a huge success and it was in every Halo game since. So it obviously was a very popular tool, and I think whether we see it in Destiny or not will probably depend a lot on time constraints and technical restraints just of the engine. If it's too hard to program, if they don't have the time to do it. Obviously, a feature like that, as awesome as it is, has to come second after gameplay. They have to make the game awesome first before they add stuff like that. Now onto the final thing that I wanted to mention in this video, which is the Ghost. The Ghost was shown in the gameplay demo and it basically seemed like a smart flashlight at first. But then we start to see that it's actually intelligent, it talks to you and even jokes around a bit. In the gameplay demo, we basically saw it flying around trying to find a way to get the lights on for you, which it eventually did, revealing a bunch of Fallen to kill, of course. Now in all the interviews afterwards, we find out that this little guy is actually quite important. They're issued to every Guardian of the city, and they're basically a little companion that you always have with you. He helps you get around the world and has the ability to unlock old technology from humanity's golden age. So in the gameplay demo, we actually saw an example of that when he turned on the lights. Those were obviously old lights back from humanity's golden age, and he was able to interact with them and activate them. So as we go through the story trying to figure out the secrets of humanity's golden age, we'll definitely be depending on him a lot to activate this old technology for us. It was also hinted at that we'll be able to upgrade and customize our Ghost, although we don't know specifics. They also made it sound like it might be possible for the Ghost to help you out in combat, perhaps after some specific upgrades or something, but that's still unconfirmed. Now the last thing we know about the Ghost is that it provides some sort of link to your personal ship. I imagine it has something to do with communication to your ship, like if you need to be picked up or something like that, but we don't know. There is actually one more thing about him though, which is that he is voiced by Peter Dinklage, who plays Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones, so that's kind of interesting. Now we do know that we can customize our Ghost. What I'm wondering is if we can choose different voices for it. In a game like this where it's so immersive and we can make so many choices, it would be pretty damn cool if we had a list of voices to choose from. I think that'd be pretty awesome. Anyways, that's it for this update. There's still plenty of little things out of E3 to cover, so stay tuned for more. And I swear that analysis of the gameplay demo is still coming. I just want to get the news done first. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like. It definitely helps out a lot and is very much appreciated. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought of everything, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next update.